So we're going to now move to Coach Linda Blade from Canada. Linda Blade is a former national champion of Canada in track and field heptathlon. She has a PhD in kinesiology. For the past 26 years, she's run a private consulting business as sport and performance professional coach in Edmonton, Alberta, working with athletes in over 15 sports, beginner to elite. Since 2014, Linda also served as president of the board for Athletics Alberta, where she has a duty to represent the province of Alberta at Canadian national sport policy meetings. In a bid to increase public awareness of the threat posed by gender ideology, Linda has partnered with journalist Barbara Kay to author a new book titled Unsporting: How Trans Activism and Science Denial Are Destroying Sport. Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on today, and over to you.
It's just incredible that we have stupid, weak sport leaders who, as Cynthia said, know exactly what's going on. IOC, NC2A, these people know exactly what they're doing, and there's no shame, and they're just doing it, and they know we know, and they just continue. So I guess my perspective is, as a former athlete, biologist, coach, and president of a sports association, I have, been speaking out publicly for about 4 years already on this. Can't believe it. Started in 2018. And I have, listened, and we've always joined these things. We're constantly reminding everybody about the biological truth. But the situation is this, that male self-identification into women's sports, this whole ideology is about politics. It's a political ideology and really not about biological truth. So what I want to do today, which is unusual, I usually talk about the biology, but I want to discuss what has turned out to be a political journey, actually. So I would say there's 4 stages to my political journey. The stage 1, I'll call the Twitter stage, because when I discovered this craziness in 2018, in January of 2018 at a committee meeting, and I realized that nobody at the table wanted to agree with me. They were all men who are also presidents of their states and provinces at the table. They were looking down at their hands, and they did not want to acknowledge the truth. They were actually scared. I could see fear. No matter, I decided, I'm alone in this. They're not going to support me. So I started tweeting and, Coach Blade and all that. And I'm sure some of you will laugh that I felt like maybe if I tweeted for a few months, that could be enough. And then I'd be finished, like 3 months to flatten the insanity or something. But no way. Obviously, that was a little bit naive. I thought the IOC was going to make a decision right away in 2018. Of course, they didn't. But no matter what I tweeted or whatever the followers, it didn't matter. I mean, all of the guys I knew were kind of secretly watching my Twitter feed going, what is Linda going on about? She's crazy. But it didn't make any difference. And actually, the only difference it really did for me was it helped me find other women who cared, and Fair Play for Women. Nicola Williams just came right up and started communicating with me, which I appreciate. But after that first stage, the Twitter stage that started, I gained some insight. One insight that I got was that top leaders in sport are far too captured to do anything about this. So as the mother of the swimmer pointed out, no matter how much you say, they just don't seem to change their opinion. So that I realized right away that I was in a pretty unique position, because change needs to happen, I think, in this fight at the grassroots ground level. And I was the president of a lowly, state, provincial track and field association. So I went to the next stage, was the ground war stage. I decided that in my own association, we could start with us, and we would have a different policy than what was being pushed at us. Instead of gender inclusion and all that, we just had a straight up biology-based policy. If you're born male, you compete with the men. If you're born female, you have an option, but you can't compete in the women's category if you're taking testosterone. That seemed pretty straightforward to me. And yet, some of our top leaders told us that policy was illegal in Canada. Well, they need to prove it. We're still there. I did quite a few podcasts at that time. And I guess what I realized after that stage, or at the end of, in the middle of that stage, the insight I saw was that we needed to get more of the public on our side. Soccer moms, hockey dads, people like this mother that spoke today, just to understand and recognize what's going on. So then that started stage 3, and I'll call it the mighty pen stage. That's the stage I started writing. I started writing op-eds, articles, post-millennium, Colette. Then I wrote the book. Thank goodness Barbara Kay, journalist in Canada, found me and got me to partner with her to write a book on sporting, how trans activism and science denial are destroying sport. That was published in 2021, excuse me. So basically it's pretty new. I felt like this was a big push, and I saw more women speaking out, and yet Laurel Hubbard still happened. So the Olympic Committee, after all this outcry, still allowed a male to do the weightlifting with the women in the Tokyo Olympics. It's amazing, because even the year before, World Rugby had come out with a policy that was sex-based, at least at the elite level. Yet all the ground level people were still saying, no, we'll be inclusive. And even beyond that, even though the World Rugby had established, and thanks to Ross Tucker, and actually Emma Hilton was part of that process, all these people had actually provided ample evidence that men shouldn't be in women's sports biologically. But obviously there's something political here, because the IOC went ahead. So in the aftermath of the Laurel Hubbard participation, something interesting happened. The IOC medical director, Richard Budgett, acknowledged, okay, our 2015 trans policy was not fit for purpose. And I think Emma Hilton later will tell you more about that policy. But they indicated in July of this past year, July or August, that they would be open to consultation. And some of the women in my world, started to notice that there was bragging going on by the trans activists, that they were also already talking to the IOC. So somehow the IOC was consulting with trans activists, but not with women. And so thanks to my colleague, Kath Thieves, in Australia, who's a lawyer, she's with Save Women's Sports Australasia. She sent a letter saying, could you at least consult with women about our category if you're going to talk about eligibility? And we got a letter back in about September, where the IOC suddenly, at least they replied to us at that point, and they said, consultation is now closed. We've already consulted with groups like yours. Well, that took us by a little bit of shock, because we didn't feel like anybody was consulting with us. We figured, well, who was? So that sort of inspired me and a few others, like, to start connecting the dots. So all the women's groups that care about sport, like Fair Play for Women, Save Women's Sports, all these different groups around the world, we decided we'd actually collect these groups on an email and just ask, were you consulted? And if you were consulted by the IOC, what did you say? What's your position? Because we need to know who's representing women, and what are you actually saying when in the halls of power? And all of these groups basically said, no, they didn't consult with us. The IOC was lying. So then, of course, November happened, and the IOC had a brand new policy, which was even worse than the last one, in my opinion. And of course, Emma will probably tell you that. And then in December, Leah Thomas happened, and it was unbelievable. And all of a sudden, it's really clear. The insight is this: we women we need to get smart politically. We're not even at the table. We don't even have a voice. And you have to find a seat at this table if we're going to make any progress. We can't be standing here being helpless. We have to get involved, roll up our sleeves, and dig deep into the politics of this. And we need to unite and be a voice collectively for sex-based boundaries, which I'm so appreciative of the Women's Declaration, because you're already doing that. But it's important, especially important, that we have somebody representing us somehow, because the IOC and NC2A, being the cowards that they are, have kicked the can down the road. As you all know, they've now left it up to the individual sports. So they create the problem with a policy, And then they don't want to resolve it. They want to not take accountability for it. They want to have the other sports deal with it. So if the other sports, every single one of the sports in the world, their governing bodies have to deal with the trans issue, then we're going to have a lot of tables we need to be sitting at. So the guest stage 4, final stage, is the networking stage. We need to start getting our act together. And in 2020, October 2021, excuse me, it became so obvious to us that we do need to have some sort of collaboration between these different, like I say, Fair Play for Women and Save Women's Sports and the Champions Group and all of these people. We need to somehow aggregate and into a single position. And, I want to tell you now, this is kind of news to people, but we've been meeting now regularly since the end of November, early December. It's been difficult. It's one thing to say we all have to have a common position, but when you get in the room, we have arguments, we have debates. What is our position? We are doing the hard work, trying to figure out what is the policy statement? What is the position? So who's involved? Well, I can't really elaborate too much. I have to be very careful because we're in negotiations and we're just trying to get this together in discussions and meetings. But so far, we have women's groups from 7 different countries. And we are pretty sure at this stage, before we have announced anything about this group, we are pretty sure we have arrived at a statement of position that we all agree with. So I'm going to read you the key things. We are invoking, in the statement of position, we invoke the tenets of the International Bill of Human Rights, the intent of the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, and we invoke the precepts of the Women's Declaration, Article 7. We believe that women and girls have a right to access and participate in sport in a manner that is fair, safe, and without discrimination. It is clear that to be denied this right is discrimination on the basis of sex. We assert that any policy discussion on eligibility in women's sports pertaining to any level, whether it's community to elite and or involving any jurisdiction, must involve women who advocate for or who work or participate in female sport and include meaningful consultation with female athletes from the sports in question. They must consult with women. If you're talking about our eligibility of our category, we must be consulted. You can't just do this without and have tape over our mouth. And finally, as part of this, we had to figure out what the definition of a female athlete is. And so we've said it's a competitor who is biologically female at birth and who has not experienced male puberty. So we have now come to where we kind of all agree with this wording, and we are still working on other aspects of this, consortium or this collective group. And it's really up like groups that are working independently in the different countries, but somehow bringing us together. And even though it's too soon to announce who we are or what the details are, I wanted to say it because I wanted to offer hope. I wanted to offer that there's something we are doing, there's something that is happening, and we are actually making good progress. And I am sure about one thing, someday soon, we women who believe in sex-based boundaries in sports will be able to, 1, claim a seat at the table when sports authorities make decisions about eligibility in our sports, women's sports, and 2, have confidence that we represent women from across the globe, including the Declaration, including all of you who've signed. And my hope is that somehow when we get to that table, we will be able to say X number of, 500,000 women, 1 million women, we represent those people. Like if somebody calls like after the Olympics and they wanted to negotiate with Linda Blade, well, who the hell is Linda Blade? Like who is she? We need to say, this is who we represent. This is our position, and we will have a voice sooner or later. You can't do this to our sport without consulting us. Thank you very much. 2 quick things. The one thing is usage of language. Those of you who've read my book know that I had to invent a way of saying a pronoun that where I said it, but sort of indicated that it really was the opposite sex. The problem is in Canada, it's against the law. Like I wouldn't even have been able to publish the book if I hadn't found another way to get around the usage of pronouns. So that's one thing we have to deal with in Canada. Is so ridiculously woke. And then the other thing is, we talk about advantages, and it's very important. I mean, it's no question, and Emma has shown unequivocally that the IOC, like, they just know that there is an advantage if you're a male, and there's no going back. It is a hard-boiled egg. You can't unboil it. But beyond that, I keep arguing, and I know it's a broken record, but it's beyond the even advantage. Even if men didn't have an advantage, they're a different design. So I always use the analogy, and I know it drives some people crazy, but you wouldn't put an F1, a Formula One car in a NASCAR race. The designs of the vehicles are different. That's why you have different categories. It's a different morphology. We talk about sexual dimorphism. You have two completely different designs, and it would be not hateful to say you shouldn't put the F1 car in a NASCAR race. Like, it has nothing to do with even advantage. Sometimes it's just the fact that we have distinct. Like, if you look at Olympic sailing, there's two different kinds of sailboats, or many different kinds of sailboats. And as Cynthia pointed out, you measure every single detail, like the smallest detail for any kind of sort of edge, 1 centimeter of the whole different. So if they do that with the Olympic Committee, why would they then allow something like a man who has a different design body into one sport like that could have like up to 50% advantage? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. I will also say that anybody who coaches children, as I do, thousands of them, you will see that little boys, even way pre-puberty, have much stronger shoulders and upper body. So like, if you ask a group of boys to do pull-ups, and then you ask the little girls to do pull-ups, there's a vast difference even before puberty in the upper body. There might not be such a great difference in terms of running and jumping, but throwing and other kinds of upper body strength, completely different shoulder structure and mechanics. So I think that it's, again, back to the structure issue. That's why I say that. And so I really think there are some sports where you could maybe combine them, but a lot of times, like in terms of upper body strength, complete difference before pre-puberty.